Welcome to Second Take, the only show where politics meets common sense, and common sense almost always loses. Tonight we dive into South Africa's latest diplomatic roast session with Donald Trump, where land expropriation is apparently worse than actual expropriation. Meanwhile, in Uganda, the Supreme Court tries to flex its muscles only to realize Museveni is still the gym instructor. In Kenya, President Ruto is renovating State House like it's a five-star Airbnb because clearly fixing the economy isn't as urgent as fixing a leaky ceiling. And in Zimbabwe, millions of dollars have vanished from Harare's city budget, proving once again that corruption in Zimbabwe isn't a crime, it's a tradition. But don't go anywhere. By the end of this episode, you'll either be laughing, crying, or drafting your own presidential campaign just to prove you can do better. Welcome to Second Take.
NTV Awards 2025. These are your nominees. Show of the Year. Viewer's Choice Presenter of the Year. Lifestyle Show of the Year. Public Affairs Show of the Year. Sport Show of the Year. Sport Presenter of the Year. My Zone Show of the Year. And Chill Personality of the Year. NTV Awards, celebrating creativity, dedication, and impact.
In our first story, diplomatic spat between South Africa and Trump administration, which has reached new levels of absurdity, with Trump cutting off future U.S. funding over South Africa's land expropriation plans. In classic Trump fashion, he declared, without a shred of proof, that the South African government was confiscating land and mistreating certain groups. In other words, he accused South Africa of doing what Israel has been doing for decades, but without the privilege of American military aid. Not to be outdone, Marco Rubio, doubling as both Secretary of State and professional outrage machine, refused to attend the upcoming G20 meeting in South Africa, slamming the land reform law as racist and accusing the country of pushing an evil agenda of diversity, equity, and the horror of horrors, climate change awareness. Meanwhile, Ramaphosa, who has likely perfected the art of sighing in presidential meetings, dismissed the accusations, reminding everyone that the policy aims to fix apartheid-era injustices, not spark anarchy. The ANC, never missing a chance to state the obvious, accused Trump of spreading misinformation, an accusation as redundant as calling the ocean wet or Trump blonde. Conveniently, Trump's funding cut was announced just as Netanyahu arrived in Washington, making the whole ordeal look less like a principled stance and more like a well-timed favor for his favorite ally, and not to mention his least favorite ally, China, who immediately swooped in to reassure South Africa of their support, like, someone that was monitoring your timeline just so they can get in your DMs after a breakup. Listen, we love. For a brief shining moment, it looked like Uganda's Supreme Court had actually managed to uphold the rule of law. Yes, the court ruled that civilians could no longer be dragged into military courts, a decision that should have been good news for opposition figures like Dr. Kizza Besigye, who was conveniently abducted from Kenya last year and thrown into a military trial for treason. But before anyone could celebrate, President Yoweri Museveni stepped in, proving once again that court rulings in Uganda hold about as much weight as a polite suggestion. The president dismissed the ruling with the kind of casual contempt usually reserved for parking tickets, leaving everyone to wonder whether the law in Uganda applies to anyone other than the powerless. Attorney General Kiwanuka Kiryowa, seemingly caught between following legal procedure and keeping his job, responded to questions about Besigye's trial with a diplomatic shrug. I don't know. When asked what legal advice he had given the government, he admitted he hadn't gotten around to it yet because apparently reading Supreme Court judgments isn't an urgent part of the Attorney General's job. Meanwhile, Uganda's judiciary is left with the task of pretending its rulings matter, while Museveni makes it abundantly clear they do not. In Kenya, in a move that would make even the most shameless politicians blush, President William Ruto has decided that while Kenyans struggle with economic hardship, the most urgent national priority is renovating the State House, yes. Despite public outcry and nationwide protests over the cost of living, Ruto is forging ahead with a multi-million-dollar plan to refurbish all presidential residencies because apparently a leaky roof at State House is bigger an emergency than collapsing public schools. The renovations will cost a whopping 10 billion shillings. 10 million, I'm being nice. 10 billion, but 23.2 million US dollars, with 775 million shillings already blown on the State House alone. When asked why, Treasury Secretary John Mbadi responded with the confidence of a man who knows logic is optional in government spending. You wanted State House to remain the same forever? Ruto had previously promised to focus only on essential projects, but it turns out that essential just means whatever makes his own life more comfortable. Human rights activist Sarah Meritei summed up the public mood perfectly. Ruto is living large while ordinary Kenyans suffer. With the 2027 elections on the horizon, this renovation spree might just be the most expensive campaign mistake he's ever made, and he's made a lot. We move over to Harare, Zimbabwe. If there's one thing Harare city officials are good at, it's making money vanish. More than $4.5 million meant to revive Harare Quarry was simply evaporated, with no paper trail, no accountability, and apparently no urgency to find out where it went. The scandal came to light during a commission of inquiry where Mayor Jacob Mafume got straight to the point. The money was stolen. When pressed for details, his response was basically a bureaucratic version of, "It was like this when I got here." According to Mafume, the previous council and management pulled off the heist before he took office, and now after 6 years, the plan is to call the police, BLD police, because naturally when millions disappear in Zimbabwe, solving the mystery is a job best left to an underpaid officer with a notebook and a pen. With Harare Quarry in ruins and the money gone, the city is left with the same question it always faces. Was this incompetence, corruption, or just another day in local Zimbabwean government? Those have been our top stories on Second Take. After the break, I talked to Irene Marie van der Walt about these stories, getting her unique opinion.
NTV Second Annual Awards 2025. This is how you can vote for your favorites. Save Synergy chatbot number +264 85785 6231 and send hashtag NTV Awards 2025 on WhatsApp and follow instructions. These are the categories you can vote for. Viewer's Choice Presenter of the Year: Precious Nyitaunapo, Toivo Njebela, Joe Marie Dadi, Aina Kweyo, and Brian Munango. Chill Personality of the Year: Miss Gideon, Jericho, DJ Vuyo, Captain Swazi, and P-Star. Voting closes 8 February 2025.
You're still with Second Take, and we are delving into our stories of the week, and I'm doing it with my partner in, I wouldn't say crime. Crime is a stretch.
I've never committed a crime.
And you are literally a journalist, and so
that's part of the reason why I've never committed a crime.
Fair enough.
It's every time like, oh, I'm a journalist. If I get caught doing this.
Absolutely, you don't want that issue. So Irene Marie van der Walt joining us on Second Take, and I'm just going to throw subjects at you, and one of them, I'll be surprised if you know about the landscape, but I just want your opinion, and I want us to just bounce off with each other. It's what Second Take is about. So, Donald Trump, South Africa, pulls out aid. Mm-hmm. Let's go point for point. Are we in agreement with that part?
Yeah.
Feels fair.
I think the first point is that has always been the fatal flaw with aid. This exact thing. We've had this discussion since I was in high school. That
someone can just pull out the aid.
Yes, and then say, if you don't change X, Y, or Z about your country, you're not getting it back.
Okay, so now we're moving on to the second point. So pulls out aid specifically from South Africa, and then he's like, very bad things are happening in South Africa. Marco Rubio also said very bad things. I don't know where their vocabulary is, but he was alluding to expropriation, the Expropriation Act, which was in South Africa. And this is what you're talking about. This is actually the danger of having aid, being so aid dependent, is that folks start thinking that they can, get things done in your country. What I can say I'm in agreement with is not in agreement with that I can't counter is the decision to remove aid, just in the sense that I think we would all expect our governments to be self-sufficient by now. And even if they're not, it's their money, it's their aid. So yeah, it is crazy. Yeah. Do you know how many let's say US aid, of the 10,000 employees, do you know how many are still going to be employed by the end of all the cuts?
I don't know, but it would, if any, it would be only a handful.
295 from 10,000. So it's a clean out. Even Americans are getting retrenched. It's what he's doing. But when it comes to talking about South Africa, now he's like, you know what I mean? He's trying to affect change in different ways. Now, I have a theory. Elon Musk wanted to get into South Africa with Starlink, right? And that was rejected. So Elon Musk right now, some might say Trump is president 1A, Elon Musk is president 1B. he's got a lot of influence in America. And of course, a lot of the communication that they're depending on is from AfriForum, which represents a specific group of people in South Africa. People who look like Ariana. If they look like me,
they're not in there.
Know what I mean? Okay.
No, so it's not that they're not in there.
It's not to say they're in there.
It's just that you likely won't find.
It's just that we likely didn't sit together.
We only look this diverse in the second takes, dude.
Yeah, this is where we just gotta call things what they are. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. That said, I did see a couple of folks that look like you with the EFF. So exchange programs. But let's come back to it. AfriForum. Doesn't it feel treasonous? Just look. I understand. Look, with this is. I think everybody deserves an advocate. I don't care what group you're from. There should be someone to advocate for you. That's not a problem that I have. But then asking a foreign government to take action on your country, sketchy ground.
Yeah, I think at the same time, one tends to look at the painting of real life from quite close up. There's this old kind of adage about. When you look at a painting from too close by, you see a patch of blue. But if you take a couple of steps back, suddenly it becomes an artwork. So I think, for AfriForum, they're in it. They're hearing about all of these things about, this person has been killed, this person has been killed, this person has been killed, this is happening with our kids, So one cannot really, I don't want to say not blame them, but one can understand how maybe they're seeing a patch of blue. That's perfect,
fine. But my point is Trump the one with the better eyesight when it comes to South Africa? You know what I'm saying? That's my point. My point is I doubt Trump knows any president outside of Nelson Mandela's name. And I mean, like, even today, after he's been talking to Cyril Ramaphosa, I will put money on the table that if you ask Donald Trump, what is the name of the president of South Africa? He probably doesn't know. So like I said, I have no issue with the advocacy. That's for other people to debate. My question, and I guess it will get answered for us over time, which is this crossing the line? Is it treasonous to, ask a foreign government to act on your government, whereas South Africa has a very functioning democracy? The elections went well. Not a single person said there were issues with irregularities. They're currently in a government of national unity with a political party which is more aligned with AfriForum than the ruling party would be, but they are in that government of national unity. They are governing, they are working. So it just feels so counterproductive, you know what I mean? But I guess this is where we are. When we saw, Trump there standing with the oligarchs, we should have known that the idea was we're going to take over the world. Yeah, fair enough. Yeah. All right, let's move on to something you might not know much about, Zimbabwe. So do you know how Mnangagwa became president?
No.
Fair and fine. Neither do we, because we're not sure if it was. We're not entirely sure. So there was a military coup, not a coup, which happened to dispose Robert Gabriel Mugabe. Now, for a military coup to happen, you need the army to assist you with that. Now, the now vice president was the head of was the army general there who was making all the parts move. Mnangagwa had fled to South Africa for his safety because he had been accused of treason by Grace Mugabe. So come see, come sa. And he was essentially in a position where he couldn't be in Zimbabwe at that time. And then Chiwenga got things going. The coup happened. Mugabe got deposed. And then we had elections after the coup. And then those elections were faced with irregularities, which is just like a nice way of putting it.
Was there another coup after that?
So that's where we're going right now. So the problem with that is, I don't think we're going there. But what people have deduced politically from the situation in Zimbabwe is that the deal was, I get you into power and then I come in next. Now the president the president's supporters, a lot of people would say the president with the president's backing, wants to extend his term, which is supposed to end in 2028 to 2030, which is a big issue, naturally. For Namibians, I was saying Zimbabweans, probably have a problem with that because Namibians had Zimbabweans in their election. We don't know what they were doing. I can't speak for them. But for Zimbabweans, this is unfolding in a particularly precarious manner quite fast, because what's happening now is war veterans who say they assisted in the ousting of Mugabe and the placing of Mnangagwa are saying Mnangagwa has messed it all up. One of them said we replaced Mugabe with a monster, right? So it's this thing where the current vice president seems to have people speaking on his behalf on one end, saying we don't want any extension. The president seems to have people speaking on his end saying we want an extension. And the last time we had chats like this, it led to a coup.
Mm-hmm. I think the extension of a presidential term in general, past what is set out by the law of a country, that's a very slippery slope in general. 100%. That's how dictatorships start.
Oh, yeah.
That's how we have countries in Africa
I think there's slippery slope, and then there's putting sunlight liquid on ice. That is beyond slippery, girl. You're sliding.
We have presidents in Africa who just get re-elected because people love them so much, when truly they don't really have any competition, and their competition seems to kind of in just shady ways. Some people are disappearing.
Some disappear, yeah.
We have that in Africa. So extending a president's term beyond what is set out in the country's constitution is a very slippery slope, and it's a very scary thing, I think, to be happening to a
especially
country.
because we're next door neighbors with Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe are friends of Namibia in many ways. Zimbabwe's only port in the world, I believe, is in Walvis Bay, subject to correction. But I just thought, I'll bring that to your fore. You had said you didn't know. So now you know. When you're paying attention to Zimbabwe, there's some extra context.
Yeah.
And it just feels like any time now it's going to implode, and we'll be paying attention to that in particular. Zimbabwe is currently the chair of SADC. So that issue is, we'll see how that unfolds. Next story, William Ruto, Kenya. William Ruto is currently renovating the State House for millions of dollars, even though Kenyans were protesting a finance bill which was going to make their pockets a whole lot tighter. How do you feel about his ability to read the political room, so to speak?
I think we see a let them eat cake attitude in African politics.
Girl, say that again.
Quite often.
Say that again, girl.
I think there's a lot of leaders who, and that's likely why, in spite of the protest, we want to tell ourselves we as the people have so much power. We don't. Your power is your vote, right? And that's provided your elections aren't interfered with.
But sorry for literally interfering at this time. But, look at the Kenyan protests, right? That was not in their votes. They stepped out, they got into the streets. And of course, they will have an opportunity to exercise their vote in 2027. Very soon, William Ruto. Thought you'd think about that. But they have pressured the government in different ways. So I'm saying that considering the pending political pressure on the ballot box and the existing political pressure in the streets, how do we get here?
But is there political pressure in the streets? Does it matter? I've often
Or does it
wondered
matter
about
to
this.
them,
Does
to
it matter
the people they're
to
protesting
the
to?
ruling class in an African country where the people are protesting?
Mm.
Does it freaking matter? That I've asked myself that so many times.
We've protested a lot
Exactly.
on this continent.
And are we heard when we do?
So the ballot box is all we have.
Yeah.
But what, I don't want to be a pessimist, but, rigging is a thing.
Rigging is a thing, and it's known to happen in SADC. Not necessarily saying it happened in Namibia with that ongoing court challenge.
Just no.
But it's known to happen in Namibia, especially, not in Namibia, my apologies.
Yeah, not in Namibia. It's very clear.
It's known to happen in Africa and in Southern Africa.
Yeah.
It's known.
Yeah.
It
In
happens.
Africa, it happens quite a bit. And
So
isn't this is when it gets scary, because you see, we said we can't go to the streets, right? No one cares. We go to the ballot. There's a chance
No
of
one
it
cares.
being rigged. Then we kind of end up in a situation like Burkina Faso. You know what I mean? Where it was a coup, but they released a new electric vehicle last week. You know what I'm saying? I'm not here to push for any kind of dictatorship of any sorts. But I'm saying, I feel like we're cornered as Africans.
yeah, I for me as well, again, not necessarily one country or another, not necessarily Namibia, not necessarily, but I think there are a lot of Africans who are caught in what in Afrikaans we would call a bose kringloop, an evil circle, where nothing really changes. It all happens. It is one of those
very
languages.
poetic. There's a word like
Bose kringloop, yeah.
bose kringloop.
Just an evil cycle.
A cycle, a toxic cycle.
Yes,
Evil, toxic
where one thing feeds the next thing. Us not necessarily having, or not us as Namibians, but voters not having that much power at the poll leads to someone who doesn't really care about them protesting being elected. And so they protest and they are not heard and nothing changes in the system, and then they go back to the polls, and then that exact same thing
if they survive the protests. As we know, in the Kenyan protests, not everybody did.
Yeah.
Irene Marie van der Walt, always a pleasure to have you on Second Take.
Always a pleasure to be here.
Looking forward to having you again and again and again as we continue to dissect the crazy world of African politics.
It all began with ink on paper, a small but powerful voice that reached the homes of Namibians, sharing their stories, their triumphs, their struggles. As the world evolved, so did we. From the presses to your screens, keeping you connected to the news that matters, wherever you are. We didn't stop at digital. We brought the action to life on your screens, covering the moments that unite us all. We're not just a source of information. We're your partner in exploration, booking your stay, paying for your meals, and even sending your event tickets straight to your phone. Reaching over 1 million people daily, we are a fully integrated system, working together to make your life easier. Whether it's news, events, or everyday information, we've brought it all together. We're committed to empowering the next generation. Through partnerships and innovation, we're delivering education to every corner of Namibia. We've become so much more. More than news, more than information. We're here to help you enjoy everything Namibia has to offer. NTV, so much more than just television.
We have two very brief TikToks of the week, but they say a lot about African men in the kitchen.
What's going on? Doctor. I'm done. Cut the show. I'm done.
And that is our show. Another week of political brilliance, or as some might call it, chaos with a government salary. South Africa remains on Trump's naughty list, but if it's any comfort, that list includes the Pope and Taylor Swift and his own vice president. Uganda's Supreme Court has been reminded that justice exists only when Museveni says so. Kenya's presidential mansion is getting a glow up while the rest of the country gets the cold shoulder. And in Zimbabwe, millions have disappeared, but somehow the suspects never do. Remember, the world of politics is like a magic show. The trick is never in what they tell you, but in what they distract you from. And the best way to navigate these poly tricks is to have a second take. Good night.